The first light of dawn had not yet broken through the Los Angeles smog, but Elena was already awake. For her, the day did not begin with the sun, but with a quiet, internal clock tuned to the rhythm of survival. She moved silently through the small apartment, a ghost in her own home, her bare feet making no sound on the worn linoleum. In one room, her two children, Carlos and Luna, slept peacefully, their small forms tangled in a shared blanket. They were her world, the twin hearts that beat outside her own body, the reason for every sacrifice, every silent prayer, every aching muscle. Elena was 32, but the worry etched around her eyes made her seem older. She was a single mother, a house cleaner, and an undocumented immigrant from Mexico. Each of these labels defined a piece of her, but none captured the whole. None could measure the fierce, unyielding love she held for her children, or the quiet dignity she carried like a shield. In the dim light of the kitchen, she prepared their breakfast, her movements economical and practiced. Frijoles simmering on the stove, fresh tortillas warming, the familiar smells of a home she had left behind, but recreated here in this tiny corner of a foreign land. She would wake them gently, with soft whispers and kisses on their foreheads. Carlos at 10 was serious and watchful, already carrying the weight of being the man of the house. Luna, at 7, was a dreamer, her eyes full of the same bright wonder Elena's once held. As they ate, Elena would tell them stories, not of struggle, but of strength. She spoke of her own abuela, her grandmother, a woman who owned nothing but her honor. "Your hands can be dirty from work," she would tell them, repeating her grandmother's words. "But your heart must always be clean. Honesty is the only jewel that no one can ever take from you." Her own work began with a long journey on 3 different city buses, traveling from the gritty, vibrant chaos of her neighborhood to the sterile, manicured perfection of the wealthy suburbs. The houses she cleaned were more like museums, vast and silent, filled with objects she was paid to polish but never truly see. Her primary client was a woman named Mrs. Covington, who lived in a sprawling mansion that seemed to have more windows than a cathedral. Mrs. Covington was a woman encased in a cool, brittle shell of privilege. She rarely spoke to Elena directly, preferring to leave passive-aggressive notes on the marble countertops. "Please use more care with the crystal. The floors are still streaky." Sometimes she would forget to leave payment, forcing Elena into the humiliating position of having to gently remind her, an act that always earned her a sigh of exaggerated annoyance. To Mrs. Covington, Elena was not a person. She was a function, a pair of hands that made messes disappear. The day that everything changed began like any other. Mrs. Covington had hosted a lavish party the night before, and the mansion was a disaster of half-empty champagne glasses, confetti-strewn carpets, and the lingering smell of expensive perfume. Elena tied on her apron and set to work, methodically erasing the evidence of the previous night's revelry. She was in the master bedroom, carefully dusting the ornate furniture, when Mrs. Covington entered, a silk robe wrapped tightly around her. She didn't acknowledge Elena, but went directly to a large antique jewelry box on her dresser. She opened it, her fingers sifting through the glittering contents. Suddenly, she let out a sharp, theatrical gasp. "It's gone," she said, her voice a low, accusatory hiss. She turned her icy gaze on Elena. "My diamond necklace. My mother's diamond necklace. It's gone." Elena's heart stopped. She stood frozen, duster in hand. "Senora?" "Don't play dumb with me, Mrs. Covington snapped, her voice rising. "It was right here. I saw it yesterday morning before you came to clean, and now it's gone. You were the only one in this room." "No, senora, I swear," Elena said, her voice trembling. The blood drained from her face. "I would never touch your things. You know me. I have worked for you for 2 years." Mrs. Covington let out a short, ugly laugh. "Know you? I don't know you at all. I know that I let you into my home and you repaid me by stealing from me." She took a step closer, her face contorted with disdain. "You people are all the same. You pretend to be so humble, but you're just waiting for a chance to take what isn't yours." The slur, the casual venom in her words, hit Elena harder than a physical blow. It wasn't just an accusation of theft. It was a judgment on her entire being, on her origins, on her very worth as a human. "That is not true," Elena said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and outrage. "I am an honest person." "Oh, spare me the theatrics," Mrs. Covington sneered. She picked up her phone from the nightstand. "I'm calling the police. We'll see how honest you are when they're putting you in handcuffs." The word police was a blade that plunged straight into Elena's heart. Police meant questions. It meant discovering her status. It meant deportation. It meant losing her children. It was the end of everything. Panic, cold and absolute, washed over her. "No, please, Senora, I beg you," she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. "Don't call them. Please, look again. It must be there. I did not take it. I swear on the lives of my children." She would have gotten on her knees. She would have done anything to stop that call. The image of her children's faces flashed in her mind, their smiles, their laughter. The thought of being ripped away from them was an agony beyond comprehension. She offered to let Mrs. Covington search her bag, her pockets, anything. Her desperation only seemed to amuse the other woman. Mrs. Covington lowered her phone, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "All right, I'll give you a chance to be honest," she said, drawing out the word mockingly. "You have until 5 o'clock this evening to return the necklace. No questions asked. But if it is not back in this box by 5 o'clock, I will not only call the police, I will call immigration. I will make it my personal mission to see you sent back to whatever dusty village you crawled out of. Do you understand me?" Elena could only nod, her throat tight with unshed tears. She felt as though the floor had dropped out from under her. She backed out of the room, her body numb, her mind a whirlwind of terror. She gathered her things and fled the cold, silent mansion, the weight of the false accusation pressing down on her like a physical stone. The long bus ride home was a special kind of hell. Every person who looked at her seemed to be able to see her guilt. The city, once a place of opportunity, now felt like a cage closing in on her. She replayed Mrs. Covington's threat over and over, the words sent back echoing in her mind. She imagined her children, alone, frightened, being passed through the cold bureaucracy of the foster care system. The carefully constructed life she had built for them, a life of love and stability despite their poverty, was about to be pulverized. When she arrived back at her small apartment, she tried to compose herself. She didn't want to frighten Carlos and Luna. But the moment Carlos saw her face, he knew. "Mama, what's wrong? You're crying." She couldn't hold it in any longer. She collapsed onto their small sofa, and the story poured out of her, the words choked with sobs of fear and injustice. Carlos listened, his young face hardening with a protective anger he was too small to act on. "She's a liar, Mama," he said, his small fists clenched. "You didn't do it. I'll go tell her." Elena pulled him into a hug, her heart breaking for his helplessness. "No, mijo. There's nothing we can do." The hours ticked by, each one a step closer to the 5 o'clock deadline. The apartment, usually her sanctuary, felt like a prison cell. She had no necklace to return. She had no way out. She considered running, packing a single bag and disappearing with her children into the night. But where would they go? They had no money, no one to turn to. They were trapped. As the afternoon light began to fade, Elena gathered her children close. She held their faces in her hands and told them how much she loved them, her voice thick with an emotion they were too young to understand. She felt a profound sense of failure. She had brought them to this country for a better life, and now her presence was the very thing that threatened to destroy them. She closed her eyes and prayed. A desperate, silent plea to the Virgin of Guadalupe for a miracle she did not believe would come. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly towards 5. The knock on the door, when it finally came, would be the sound of her world ending. The clock on the wall read 4:58 p.m. Elena sat on the sofa, her arms wrapped tightly around Carlos and Luna, who had fallen into a restless sleep against her. She was reciting the Hail Mary under her breath, not out of any real hope for divine intervention, but because the familiar words were a comfort, a small piece of solid ground in a world that was turning to liquid beneath her feet. She was no longer crying. A strange, calm resignation had settled over her. She had done her best. She had loved her children with every fiber of her being. If this was the end, she would face it with the same dignity her abuela had spoken of. Her phone, an old prepaid model that sat on the small end table, suddenly buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Her heart leaped into her throat. Was this it? Was it the police, calling to tell her they were on their way? Her hand shook as she reached for it. "Hello?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Elena?" a man's voice asked. It was agitated, stressed. "This is Mark Covington, my wife's husband." Elena was confused. "Senor Covington." "Listen, Elena, my God, my wife has made a terrible, terrible mistake." He sounded genuinely distressed. "She found it. The necklace. She found the necklace." Elena felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. She found it? "Yes," he said, letting out a long, frustrated sigh. "It turns out it wasn't even her mother's necklace. It was a new one. She has a bit of a shopping problem. She bought it last week and hid it from me because she knows I think she spends too much. She stuffed it inside a designer shoe in the back of her closet to hide it and then completely forgot where she put it. She only just found it now, by accident." The relief that flooded through Elena was so powerful it almost brought her to her knees. It was a physical sensation, like a heavy weight being lifted from her chest, allowing her to breathe for the first time all day. Mr. Covington was still talking, his words rushing out in a torrent of apology. "I am so sorry, Elena. I just got home and she told me what happened, what she said to you, how she threatened you. There is no excuse for it, none. It's monstrous. I am ashamed of her." He paused, and she could hear him take a deep breath. "I've just been to the bank. I deposited $5,000 into your account. It's not enough to make up for what she did, I know that, but it's a start. And please, you never have to set foot in our house again. I would completely understand." Elena mumbled a thank you, her mind still reeling. The terror of the last several hours was slowly receding, but in its place, a cold, hard anger was beginning to form. The money was a lifeline, a solution to so many of her practical problems. But it couldn't erase the humiliation. It couldn't heal the wound of being seen as a stereotype, a caricature, a thing to be accused and discarded. The next morning, Elena woke with a new resolve. She dressed herself and her children with care. She then took 2 buses back to the affluent suburb, to the cold, imposing mansion. She walked up the stone pathway and rang the doorbell. Mrs. Covington answered, her face a mask of annoyance and mild embarrassment. She was dressed in expensive athletic wear, clearly on her way to a yoga class or a tennis lesson. "Oh, it's you," she said, not bothering to invite Elena in. "I assume my husband called you. It was all just a silly misunderstanding." The casual dismissal, the complete lack of genuine remorse, solidified Elena's anger into a diamond-hard point of clarity. She looked Mrs. Covington directly in the eye, her posture straight, her voice clear and steady. "No, Senora Covington," she said calmly. "It was not a misunderstanding. It was an accusation. You called me a thief. You looked at me and decided I was guilty because of the language I speak and the work that I do." Mrs. Covington's face tightened. She was not used to being spoken to this way. Elena continued, her voice never rising, yet carrying an immense power. I clean your toilets, I scrub your floors, I wash the dishes you leave in the sink, but I am not dirt. My hands are rough from work, Senora, but they are honest hands. I am a mother. I teach my children that dignity is more valuable than any diamond. That is a lesson you have clearly never learned. She reached into her purse and pulled out a plain white envelope. I believe this belongs to you, she said, holding it out. Mrs. Covington looked at it, confused. What is this? It is the money your husband sent to my account. I withdrew it this morning. I do not want it. My dignity, Senora, is not for sale. As Mrs. Covington stood there, speechless, a figure appeared in the grand doorway behind her. It was Mr. Covington. He had been there the whole time, had heard every word. He looked at his wife with an expression of profound disappointment, then looked at Elena with something akin to awe. Elena, please, he said, stepping forward. Don't. You deserve that money. You deserve so much more. Elena did not turn back. She kept her eyes forward as she walked away from the house, her head held higher than it had ever been. I have my self-respect, Signor Covington, she said, her voice carrying on the clean morning air. Today, that is more than enough. She walked down the long, pristine street, away from the sterile mansion and the woman who lived inside it. She felt a lightness she hadn't felt in years. She was still a house cleaner, still undocumented, still a single mother with 1,000 struggles ahead of her. But she was no longer afraid. She had faced down the monster of prejudice and had not flinched. The story did not end there. A week later, Mark Covington found her. He didn't send an assistant. He came himself to her small apartment. He told her that her words had shaken him to the core, reminding him that his own grandparents had come to America as poor Italian immigrants, with nothing but their pride and their work ethic. He saw the same spirit in her. He had noticed the small, foil-wrapped containers of food she sometimes brought for her own lunch, and had once tasted a bite she offered him. He knew she was a phenomenal cook. He made her a different kind of offer. Not charity, but an investment. He would help her start a small, legitimate catering business. His lawyers would handle her legal status, arguing her case. His connections would provide her first clients. Today, if you go to the farmer's market in that part of Los Angeles, you will find a bustling stall called Cocina de Elena. You will see a proud woman, her eyes bright, serving the most delicious, authentic Mexican food you have ever tasted. You will see her son, now a tall teenager, taking orders with a confident smile, and her daughter arranging flowers on the tables. Elena is no longer cleaning up other people's messes. She is the architect of her own beautiful life, a life built not on diamonds or privilege, but on the indestructible foundation of her own spirit. And somewhere, in a cold mansion across town, a woman sits alone, surrounded by all her expensive things, a prisoner in a cage of her own making. Elena's story is one of incredible strength and dignity. What did you think of her decision to return the money? Was Mrs. Covington's accusation unforgivable? Let us know in the comments. We also want to hear from you. Tell us your age and the city you're watching from. Have you ever had to stand up for your dignity in a difficult situation? Share your story with us, because every voice matters.